These are 4 consecutive James Bond films where Daniel Craig wore Tom Ford suits that looked incredible on screen, but were fundamentally wrong for his body. From Quantum of Solace through No Time to Die, Craig's Bond became a style icon while simultaneously demonstrating everything you should not do when fitting a suit. The irony is almost poetic. Here is the world's most famous secret agent, supposedly the epitome of sophisticated masculinity, bursting out of suits that were too tight, too short, and cut in a way that fought against his muscular frame with every movement. Yet these films launched a global menswear trend that dominated fashion for over a decade. To understand how we got here, we need to go back to 2006, when Daniel Craig first stepped into the role. Casino Royale marked a complete reinvention of James Bond, and nowhere was this more apparent than in his wardrobe. Gone were the days of Pierce Brosnan's perfectly tailored Brioni suits, crafted by the legendary costume designer Lindy Hemming, who had dressed Bond for over a decade. Hemming was a traditionalist. She believed in what she called contemporary but classic styling, following the principles of proper suit fit that had been refined since the days of Anthony Sinclair, who tailored Sean Connery's iconic Bond suits in the 1960s. Her Bond wore suits that moved with the actor's body, respecting the fundamental principles of menswear that had been refined over centuries. When she fitted Brosnan and even Craig in Casino Royale, the suits looked like they belonged on a gentleman's body, rather than fighting against it. But Hemming's era ended with Casino Royale. For Quantum of Solace in 2008, a new costume designer named Louise Frogley took over, and with her came a revolutionary partnership that would change Bond's look forever. Tom Ford. The timing was perfect, or perhaps perfectly disastrous, depending on your perspective. Tom Ford had launched his menswear line just 2 years earlier, in 2006, riding the wave of a fashion revolution that had been brewing since 2000. That was when Hedi Slimani took over at Dior Homme and began pushing an entirely new silhouette, the skinny suit. Slimane's vision was radical. He took the traditional masculine suit and shrunk it down, creating a second skin effect that emphasized the body underneath. By 2005, this look was gaining traction in high fashion circles, but it remained largely underground. It would take James Bond to bring it to the masses. The transformation was immediate and shocking. In Quantum of Solace, Craig appeared in Tom Ford suits that were noticeably tighter than anything Bond had worn before. While the fit was snug, it was still within the realm of wearable. The jacket had what tailors call a close fit through the body, meaning it followed Craig's muscular frame without actively fighting it. But then came 2012 and Skyfall, the film that would cement the tight suit aesthetic in popular culture. Costume designer Janie Tamimi, taking over from Frogley, pushed the envelope even further. She had a very specific vision for Craig's Bond, inspired by 2 very different style icons. Tamim said she looked to Alain Delon for how James Bond should look, while also keeping Steve McQueen in her head because Daniel Craig wanted that influence. She aimed for a beautiful, sexy bad boy, and the production delivered that. The result was a look Tamim described as iconic for 2012. And indeed it was. The suits in Skyfall were so tight that they redefined what audiences expected from menswear. Craig's jackets strained across his chest, the buttoning point pulled across his waist, and the lapels buckled away from his body. The sleeves were so narrow that they restricted movement, often riding up when Craig gestured or fought. From a technical tailoring perspective, everything was wrong. The shoulders were too narrow for Craig's frame. The chest and hips were cut too tight. The jacket length was slightly too short. The sleeves were too narrow, too long, and had what tailors call the wrong sleeve pitch, meaning they did not follow the natural hang of Craig's arms. But here's the fascinating part. It worked dramatically. Craig's Bond was meant to be different from his predecessors. This was not the refined gentleman spy of Sean Connery or Roger Moore. This was a blunt instrument, a man who solved problems with physical force rather than witty repartee. The tight suits became a visual metaphor for psychological constraint, a character literally bursting out of the traditional Bond mold. The production requirements only made things worse. Action films demand multiple versions of every costume. For the Mexico scene in Spectre alone, rumors suggest they needed 85 suits. For No Time to Die, the costume team calculated they could make 33 tuxedos from the available fabric, and then created what they called a matrix of who would get what tux when and the size differentials. Craig himself acknowledged the complexity. He said that in a fight sequence where he or the other actor gets cut 30 seconds into the sequence, however long it takes to shoot 30 seconds, which can be a day, they need one suit for that day and another suit for the next day. This led to a peculiar solution. The team used smaller sizes for hero shots, the close-up glamour moments, and larger sizes for action sequences. If a larger size was needed for action, the intended look for the hero suits was simply too small for a human being to move in comfortably. Take the white tuxedo in Spectre's train fight scene. They made two different versions of the same jacket. The non-fight version was cut impossibly slim for maximum visual impact. The action version had pleats behind the shoulders, what tailors call a bi-swing back, to allow extreme upper body movement. These pleats were invisible in normal shots, but they were essential for the physicality of the fight choreography. The irony deepens when you consider Tom Ford's role in all this. Ford became known for the shrunken Bond look, but his design philosophy is not about making suits too small. Ford's aesthetic is form-fitting, but not aggressively tight. He understands the principles of proper tailoring. The problem was that Ford does not make bespoke suits. True bespoke tailoring means creating a completely unique pattern for each individual client, accounting for every quirk of their physique. Craig has an extremely muscular build that simply cannot be accommodated by off-the-rack or even made-to-measure clothing. Ford's suits were essentially pulled from stock, specifically the O'Connor cut and Windsor cut models, and altered as much as possible. But you can only adjust a pre-made garment so far before it stops functioning properly. Janie Tamaime bears much of the responsibility for the specific silhouette we see in Skyfall and Spectre. While Tom Ford provided the suits, Tamaime dictated how they should fit. Interestingly, all the other men in both films wear properly fitting suits. The poor fit is specific to Bond, which suggests it was a deliberate, creative choice, rather than a misunderstanding of proper suit fit. Craig himself was heavily involved in these decisions. According to reports, he specifically requested a slim-fit, 60s-style suit tailored very near his body, a suit that moved with him during action scenes and fit like a second skin. He wanted clothes that emphasized his physicality, even if that meant sacrificing traditional notions of proper fit. The cultural impact was immediate and massive. Skyfall became the highest-grossing Bond film at the time, earning $1.109 billion worldwide, and Craig's look became the template for how modern men thought they should dress. The midnight blue tuxedo from the Macau casino scene, paired with Crockett & Jones shoes and an Omega Seamaster, sparked a particular trend, with stars like Ryan Gosling, Kevin Spacey, and Bradley Cooper adopting similar looks for red carpet events. But the influence went far beyond Hollywood. The Skyfall look became mainstream fashion. Men who had never considered wearing a fitted suit suddenly wanted clothes that hugged their bodies. Retailers adapted, offering increasingly slim-cut garments. The entire menswear industry shifted toward this aesthetic. There is a compelling argument that this trend represented something deeper than just fashion. The tight suit movement coincided with a broader cultural shift in how masculinity was expressed. The old model of masculine dressing, loose and comfortable, focused on ease of movement, was replaced by something more body-conscious, more overtly sexual, more performative. Craig's Bond embodied this new masculine ideal. He was physical, vulnerable, emotionally complex. His too tight suits became armor that did not quite fit, a visual representation of a character struggling to contain his own intensity within traditional frameworks. The technical problems were real, though. Tailoring experts who analyzed Craig's suits noted specific issues that went beyond stylistic choice into the realm of poor craftsmanship. His right sleeve was consistently about 2 inches too short, likely because his dominant arm's bicep was so developed that the tight sleeve rode up whenever he moved. The collar consistently lifted off his neck, a clear sign that the jacket's back balance was wrong for his posture. The trousers had their own issues. They were cut so slim through the thigh and knee that they created what tailors call pulling lines, diagonal creases that indicated the fabric was under stress. The trouser length was often too short as well, creating an awkward gap between the shoe and hem that disrupted the clean line from waist to floor. Yet for all these technical flaws, the look was undeniably compelling on screen. The tight suits created a sense of barely contained energy that perfectly matched Craig's interpretation of the character. Every scene carried a subtle tension, as if Bond might literally burst out of his clothes at any moment. The production logistics became increasingly complex as the films progressed. By Spectre, they were dealing with what amounted to a massive manufacturing operation. The costume department had to account for different sizes for different types of scenes, backup suits for damaged ones, and multiple versions of the same outfit for different lighting conditions and camera angles. Sudarat Anne Larlarb took over as costume designer for No Time to Die, and there were subtle improvements in fit. The Tom Ford suits were still tight by traditional standards, but they no longer looked actively painful. The straining across the chest was reduced, and the overall silhouette was slightly more forgiving. This timing was significant because by 2019, when No Time to Die was in production, the fashion world was already beginning to shift away from the ultra-slim aesthetic. Wide fits were making a comeback, particularly among younger consumers who saw the Skyfall look as dated, literally their father's style. The pendulum had swung. The same fashion magazines that had celebrated Craig's body-conscious suits were now promoting relaxed fits and pleated trousers. Even mainstream retailers like J.Crew were selling wide-leg pants and looser-cut jackets. This created an interesting problem for the Bond franchise. Craig's tight suits had become so synonymous with his interpretation of the character that any significant change would signal a fundamental shift in how Bond was conceived. Yet, holding on to the look risked making the character seem stuck in the past. The broader cultural conversation around menswear had evolved as well. The hyper-masculine, body-obsessed aesthetic of the early 2010s was giving way to something more diverse and inclusive. The idea that men needed to display their physicality through impossibly tight clothing was being questioned. Looking back, Craig's Bond suits represent a fascinating moment in fashion history. They demonstrate how cinema can influence real-world style in ways that have nothing to do with practical wearability. Millions of men attempted to recreate Craig's look without understanding that it required a very specific body type, professional tailoring support, and the acceptance that comfort would be sacrificed for visual impact. The suits also reveal the complex relationship between character and costume. Craig's interpretation of Bond needed clothes that reflected his psychological state: constrained, intense, slightly uncomfortable. The poor fit was not a mistake. It was a metaphor made visible through tailoring choices. As the Bond franchise moves forward with a new actor, the question becomes whether the tight suit aesthetic will survive the transition. Current fashion trends suggest probably not. The industry has moved toward more relaxed, sustainable, and inclusive approaches to dressing. The hyper-masculine display that Craig's suits represented feels increasingly out of step with contemporary values. Former Bond costume designer Janie Tamimi herself has expressed doubt about whether the franchise can successfully adapt to current times. Speaking about the challenges facing any future reboot, she noted that adapting Bond to contemporary sensibilities had already been difficult a decade ago, and the cultural landscape has only become more complex. The legacy of Craig's Bond suits is complicated. They were technically wrong by every traditional measure of proper tailoring, yet they created one of the most influential looks in modern menswear history. They demonstrated that sometimes breaking the rules can be more powerful than following them, especially when the rule breaking serves a larger artistic purpose. These suits will be remembered not for their craftsmanship, but for their cultural impact. They changed how a generation of men thought about fit and masculinity. They proved that costume design in popular films can reshape entire industries. And they showed that sometimes the wrong choice can be exactly the right choice, even if your tailor would disagree. In the end, Craig's Bond suits achieved something remarkable. They made poor fit feel aspirational. That is a legacy that will outlast any fashion trend.